Today, we're digging into how a superpower collapses. But this isn't your typical story of an invading army. No, this empire's fall was caused by something that rotted it from the inside out for centuries. So, let's just ask the question straight up. How does a 700-year-old Christian superpower, we're talking the heir to the Roman Empire here, lose its wealthiest lands, places like Egypt, Syria, North Africa, in less than a decade? I mean, this wasn't some slow, drawn-out decline. It was a sudden, shocking collapse. You have to wonder, how is that even possible?
Well, it turns out the answer isn't just about the invaders. That's the easy explanation. The real story, the one we're unpacking here, is about how the empire completely hollowed itself out from the inside. Its own policies created the perfect conditions for its own spectacular defeat.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to jump back in time. We're talking 3 whole centuries before the collapse, back to the very first Christian emperor, Constantine, because this is where a dangerous new tool was forged for the empire. And that tool? They called it the Sword of Caesar. Think about that. It was this radical, almost unthinkable idea that the full power of the Roman state, its armies, its laws, its prisons, could be turned inward, used against its own citizens, against fellow Christians, all to enforce one single, official version of the faith. It's like handing a Roman weapon over to the church to police itself. And it didn't take long for this sword to be drawn. The very first time was in 317 AD. Constantine actually sent Roman troops to seize churches from a rival Christian group in North Africa, the Donatists. And yeah, people died. But here's the kicker, it didn't even work. All the attack did was make the Donatists dig their heels in even harder. It set this incredibly dangerous, and as we'll see, self-destructive precedent. And this really shows you what Constantine's priority was. It wasn't about getting the theology right, it was all about keeping the empire together. I mean, look at this timeline. In 325, he exiles this guy, Arius. But just a few years later, he realizes Arianism is still super popular and he needs stability, so he does a complete 180. He brings Arius back from exile and kicks out his main opponent, Athanasius. It was pure politics, all the way to the end. He was even baptized by an Arian bishop on his deathbed.
And don't think this kind of ruthlessness was just reserved for church squabbles. Nope. This is an emperor who executed his own son and his own wife just to hold on to power. So if you're willing to do that, you're definitely not going to have a problem using that same brutal force to hammer the church into unity. The logic is exactly the same. Power, absolute power, comes first. So what started out as Constantine's political games, well, it didn't stay that way. Over the next couple of centuries, it morphed into something much more terrifying, a systematic, legal machine for persecution. Let's take a look at how that happened. Fast forward to the 6th century, and you get Emperor Justinian. He's the one who basically wrote this persecution into the law books. His famous legal code said, this one specific theology is the only legal one, period. And if you disagreed, you faced what was called civil death. I mean, imagine that. You lose the right to own property, to have a job, even to serve in the army. Your personal beliefs, what you held in your heart, were now officially a form of treason. And this whole policy of state-sponsored persecution, it reached its absolute, most brutal peak in the 7th century, right on the eve of the invasions. It all went down in the super wealthy province of Egypt. And the man pulling the strings was Cyrus of Alexandria, a guy who held all the cards. He was both the political governor and the top church leader. And the cruelty was just horrific. To give you an idea, look at what Cyrus's forces did to a man named Mina, who happened to be the brother of the local Coptic pope. They tortured him with burning torches and then sewed him into a sack with stones and drowned him in the Nile River. This wasn't some abstract policy debate anymore. This was violent state-sponsored terror, and it was directed at fellow Christians. Okay, so let's put it all together. After centuries of this escalating persecution, the empire had basically created this huge population of its own citizens who hated their own government. They saw it as the enemy. And right at that moment, a new army appears on the horizon. So when the Arab armies showed up, think about it from the perspective of the local Christians in Egypt and Syria. Why on earth would you fight and die for the very same government that was torturing your leaders and taking your property? You wouldn't. In fact, for a lot of these people, the invaders didn't look like conquerors, they looked like liberators. And get this, we have writings from a Coptic bishop, John of Nechiu, who lived through the whole thing. And he didn't see it as a tragedy, not at all. He wrote that he saw the invasion as God's divine judgment, a punishment for the Byzantine Empire's years and years of cruelty against his people. Wow.
But here's the puzzle. This same wave of invasion was stopped dead in its tracks in Western Europe. So what gives? Why did the East collapse so spectacularly while the West managed to hold on? The answer, it turns out, is all about how they were built. It's really a tale of two very different places. The East was this hollowed-out empire, a centralized theocracy totally obsessed with purging its own people, which, surprise, created a population that deeply resented it. But the West was more like a fresh vine. Power was spread out across a bunch of smaller kingdoms. Their energy was focused outward, on missions and converting new people, and loyalties were local. The West just hadn't built that same empire-wide machine for self-destruction. So let's break down why the West survived. First, you didn't have a single, all-powerful ruler who could force a continent-wide purge like the emperor could in the East. Second, they were way more focused on looking outward, converting pagans, not inward with all these purity tests. And third, and this is crucial, when the big military test came at the Battle of Tours, the local Frankish forces fought like hell to defend their own homes. That's a motivation the people in Egypt and Syria just didn't have. So, let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway here? Because this isn't just some dusty old story. It's a really powerful, timeless lesson about power, what unity actually means, and the danger of forcing belief. I mean, just look at this progression over 3 centuries. It's devastating. You start in the 4th century with Constantine, exile, seizing property. Then in the 6th century, Justinian makes it the law of the land, creating civil death. And it all culminates in the 7th century with Cyrus, with drowning, torture, blinding. It was this 300-year-long slow burn that just hollowed out an entire civilization from the inside. So in the end, the Byzantine Empire's obsession with demanding perfect unity, it backfired spectacularly. In their search for a perfectly obedient state, they got something else entirely, a population that wouldn't lift a single finger to save it. And it all comes down to this powerful idea. Coerced unity is not unity. It is the performance of unity at the cost of the reality. And that really leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today, doesn't it? What's the real difference between true unity, the kind built on actual loyalty, and just the appearance of unity, the kind that's enforced by fear? For the Byzantine Empire, figuring out the answer to that question, well, it cost them everything.